Ladies and gentlemen, spoiler season is here, so let's discuss the cards we've seen thus far. Keep in mind, this is before like a bunch of spoilers come out today. Like there's going to be a bunch of spoilers from like Red Zone Rogue and LSV over at Channel Fireball. So there's going to be a lot of spoilers that come out today. These are the ones that we had like over the evening and into the morning of the first spoiler day. And I always want to say this before we get too far into it, you should definitely go down into the description, go down to the link in the description and check out all of the spoiler videos and posts that these cards were originally posted on, because these are not spoilers given to me. You should go support the people that actually made videos for this and actually produced content for these spoilers, because the content is all fantastic and you should support those people. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about these cards. Some of these are really cool, including Electrify. Electrify cost 1. It blocks for 2. It's a lightning action, and this is a common, so we expect to see this in a cycle. That means basically we're going to get red copies of it, yellow copies, and blue copies of it, and they're going to probably change one of the variables here on the card, and that's going to be how much damage this card deals. So it says the next time that an attack action card hits a hero this turn, it deals 3 damage to them. And again, if we have a cycle here, the yellow is probably going to deal 2 damage, and then the blue would probably deal 1 damage. And by the way, this is kind of a weirdly worded card, but essentially this is like, if at all like this, this attack hits your opponent, it will deal whatever the damage, it hits your opponent for, plus, in this case, 3. Makes sense? Like, it would also deal 3 damage on top of whatever else it dealt. So it's kind of a weirdly worded card, but that's essentially what this is doing. Also, if you play this from your arsenal, you draw a card and you go again. Of course, go again. Drawing a card, if you play this from arsenal, is absolutely crazy. This costs 1. You can play the red and like have something over deal for 3, which is pretty nuts. But drawing a card alongside of that, coming from arsenal, this card is bonkers cool, man. This is going to be a really cool card to play, and because it's a lightning action, it's going to be accessible to Lexi, and it could also be accessible to one of the other heroes. It would appear that the way that they're doing this is that they are giving 2 of the 3 elemental affiliations, whatever you want to call them, 2 of them to each hero. And we know that Lexi is able to interface with ice and lightning, and this is a lightning card, so she can interface with this card. In, what was it? Why did I blank? In Eisenloft, they talked about, that sort of area being connected to earth and ice. And then they talked about the Candlehold area being connected to lightning and earth. And so whoever comes from Candlehold, we will get access to this card as well for that person. So I think this is going to be a really good card, particularly in draft. In draft and in sealed, this card is nuts because it's going to threaten so much extra damage. And when you're already playing with unoptimized decks, and when you're already playing with 20 life, this card from your arsenal, giving you that card cycle and then giving you the threat of 3 extra damage or 2 extra damage, even 1 extra damage on top of things, is super gross. Obviously, you'd want the red to be you'd want the red to be the one that comes from arsenal, because then you draw the card and you're threatening 3 extra damage, but still absolutely nuts. Next up on the list is Frazzle. Frazzle is an what? Next up we have Frazzle. Frazzle is a 1 cost 5 attack arrow, akin to things like hamstring shot or sleep dart. I think is a 5 cost or 5 attack 1 cost arrow on top. It blocks for 3 like most arrows do. This is an elemental ranger action. It's an arrow attack. So in order to fire this, you have to have a bow. You can't just play this in any old class and any old elemental. But you're going to run a bow with Lexi because that's what she does. And she has, or this card, I should say, has lightning fusion. And this is our definition of fusion. Fusion is, as an additional cost to play Frazzle, you may reveal a lightning card from your hand. So in other words, if you have in your hand a lightning card and you pay the cost of Frazzle with another card, let's just say you pitch another card to pay Frazzle's cost, you play it out there, and then as you are paying that cost from a different card, you also choose to reveal a lightning card from your hand, then you get this beneficial effect. If Frazzle was fused, Whenever an attack would deal damage this turn, instead it deals that much damage +1. And this is not just Frazzle. If Frazzle deals damage, it would get that +1 effect if you fused it. But it also applies to anything else after this. So if for some reason, like, you know, they block out Frazzle and then you try to play another arrow attack after this, that would deal that much damage +1, which is very, very cool, because all of a sudden we have all of these weird on-hit effects that your opponent's having to just kind of like jump through hoops and try to figure out, do I need to take the damage here? Do I block this one? Do I expect something stronger to come down the pipeline? It's all very interesting, and this is one of those cards that when when you look at it, it's a 1 for 5. You have to fire it from your arsenal, but as you'll see, we now, I mean, if you've already been following, we now have confirmation that there will be somehow 2 arsenal zones that you could possibly be loading arrows into. So maybe it's a little bit easier to actually load the arrow, defend on your opponent's turn, and then pay your costs and fire your arrows. If that's the case, then all of these like fusion abilities, all of these are going to be very, very interesting going forward as far as on-hit effects go. Next up, we have Buzzbolt. Buzzbolt is also a 1 for 5 on red. The yellow is really interesting because all of the yellows on these arrows thus far are 1 for 4s, and a 1 for 4 just barely settles on that breakpoint of 4 instead of 3, which is a really interesting breakpoint to attack. So maybe you don't necessarily try to run all the reds. Maybe you run some yellows. Maybe Lexi doesn't need to run a bunch of reds, and she can just run a bunch of yellows, which are all 1 for 4s, which is pretty good. This also has lightning fusion, so if you, as an additional cost, if you choose to, you can reveal a lightning card from your hand after you've paid Buzzbolt's cost, and then you get the fuse effect. If it was fused, whenever an attack hits a hero, it deals 1 damage to them. So in a way, it's very similar to Frazzle's effect. It's very interesting because like all of these are kind of doing the same thing, and they're making your opponent really think about full blocking or taking over block damage. I don't know if that's not the right way to say it. Taking extra damage, basically. It's a lot like Searing Shot from back in the day. Because Searing Shot, if it hit, it would deal 1 damage, you know? That's basically what we're looking at here. But this provides the effect for future attacks as well. And that's an interesting point to remember, is that if they overblock on a Searing Shot, then you wouldn't have that extra damage dealt. But this one applies to Buzzbolt and anything that comes after it. And because of that, these cards are very interesting for on-hit effects. This goes down as one of my favorite arts thus far. Chilling Ice Vein is another 1 for 5 arrow. This has Ice Fusion, so as an additional cost, you can reveal an ice card from your hand, and if you do, then it becomes fused. Chilling Ice Vein becomes fused. If it was fused, whenever an attack deals deals damage to a hero, period, they discard a card unless they pay 1. So in other words, this is like consuming volition, but they can stop it by paying a resource, which is really spicy because if your opponent's not trying to do things on your turn, like if they're just trying to, like get rid of or like play stuff on their turn and not worry too much about what goes on your turn, and they're just blocking and maybe even just not even blocking at all, then this basically says you're going to either discard a card or you're going to cycle a card to the bottom of your deck and be 1 card down in your hand anyway. So either way, if you fuse this card and it deals damage, or anything after this deals damage, then your opponent is going to lose a card from their hand, and that is really cool. I think this is a really neat effect, and again, all of these arrows are applying as they go to other attacks in the combat chain on your turn. So it's really interesting. I'm very curious to see if we're going to be able to like stack up multiple arrows into multiple arsenal slots and jam them at our opponent. All of these, as you can see, are very cheap. They all cost 1, and because they all cost 1, we can more easily and comfortably kind of play them and pay for them with a threadbare hand, because if we're again blocking a little bit on our own turn, then perhaps if we can trigger this this fusion effect, we can string a couple of attacks together with a 2 or 3 card hand on our turn. And that's going to be the really interesting thing going forward, to see how this all plays, not in a perfect setting, but in an actual game setting. Speaking of fun things, Voltaire Strike Twice is the majestic elemental ranger weapon bow, two-handed. It's the bow that Lexi is literally holding. It's super cool looking. It's got a twice per turn instant pay 1 resource effect. You can put an arrow card from your hand face up into an empty arsenal zone you control. If you do, you choose one. It gets +1 or it gets go again. So the interesting thing here is this idea of, do I do this on my opponent's turn? If I do, I'm losing out on the +1 or the go again effect, but I am loading my arsenal. So there's that aspect to it. Or are we doing this on our turn so that these cards that we've seen before this, which don't have go again, can be strung together more easily? This one, of course, is a non-attack action card, so it does have go again. But, you know, thinking about how the bow works, if we do this effect as an instant on our turn, we pitch 2 resources. Usually that's probably like 1 card, like a yellow or a blue. We pitch, let's just say we pitch a blue. We load 2 arrows face up. Let's just say they're these 2. We have 1 card left in hand. Maybe we load 2 lightnings, and we fire a Frazzle with go again and a Buzz Bolt with +1. All of a sudden we have on-hit effects that we're threatening. We have stronger attacks. One of those was a 6. One of those was a 5 if we're playing both red ones. And, you know, we have the ability to reveal a card from our hand for one of them and then pitch to pay for the cost of the other one later down the line. So there's some lines here that this allows us to do that can threaten a decent amount of damage each turn, even if we only have, like, you know, a threadbare hand fairly. Plus, you don't have to use this effect twice. You could actually load one of these arrows face down at the end of your turn, and then at the beginning of your turn, you could use the once per turn instant and load at that point. You could also, you know, fire an arrow first, then pay to load at instant speed, and then give go again to the ones that you fire afterwards. You just have to figure out how to give go again to that first arrow. And again, that goes back to kind of one of the things that Ranger has always struggled with, is giving your arrows go again and keeping them moving, because not all these arrows, as you can see, have go again on them, so you have to find a way to string them together, right? And these weapons are one way to do that, by loading them up and giving them go again. And we saw that as well with the Shiver bow as well. Finally, we come to, I think, the coolest 2 cards that were revealed thus far. Chill to the Bone is a 0-cost ice action that says the next time an ice or elemental attack hits a hero, create 3 Frostbite tokens under their control. And we finally know what Frostbite is. Frostbite looks amazing. It says cards and activated abilities you control cost an additional +1 resource. At the beginning of your end phase, or when you play a card or activate an ability, you destroy the token, or the tokens. Because again, this creates 3, and basically it's making something more expensive for your opponent. So if you're playing against Chain, and they want to shackle at the beginning of their turn, they have to pay a resource for each Frostbite token in order to shackle, because shackling is an activated ability. You activate shackle, soul shackle, and or you activate Chain's ability and creates a soul shackle, right? So it's an activated ability. So that is one way that you can slow down a Chain player. Now, keep this in mind. Frostbites go away the moment you pay for them. The moment that you play a card or activate an ability, they will all dissipate. Your opponent, of course. So I don't think there's ever a reason you would give this to yourself unless there's some synergy for having Frostbites that we see going forward. But essentially what we have here is a way to just make things more expensive for your opponent on their turn. There are ways around this on your own turn or on your opponent's turn. There are ways to destroy these early, but you're always going to have to pay for some sort of cost in association to these Frostbite tokens. And so it's very interesting for go wide classes to have this very, I have exactly enough resources for what I want to do to go wide. Giving them even just 1 Frostbite token starts to turn that on its head. And I have a video coming out on Channel Fireball where I'm going to break down how this affects the meta and how Frostbite tokens could change things as we go forward. If you want to check that video out, it'll come out in the next couple of days, so I'd head over to that. So those are the cards that we've seen thus far. I think they're very exciting. I think they're really cool. I am so excited to see more arrows and more like legendaries. There's supposed to be a legendary that comes out today. I'm super pumped to see all of those. If you guys like these spoilers, let me know what you think about them in a comment below. Tell me if I missed something or if I said something incorrectly. I'm pretty sure this is all how they work. Let me know in a comment below. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.